Yeah, really interesting those comments to Laura Jays earlier in Robertson, Andrew, and the voter that said referred to Peter Dutton but called him Donald at the start of it. It sort of says it all about where he's at in terms of what he's trying to do in that response to you, which was so forceful. What's the message more broadly, say on tax cuts and so on? Because I know you pushed him on that, saying, why did you choose that as the hill to fight on?
Yeah, he confirmed in this interview that they looked at several options of tax cuts, but in the budget, the opposition budget lock-up, they decided we just can't agree to these $5 to $10 Labor tax cuts, and they went the fuel excise policy, as we know, instead. And Peter Dutton also saying here they might extend that past the original 12 months promise. Have a listen. Was it a tactical mistake to say no to Labor's tax cuts?
No, I don't think so. And I think if you look at there was some polling out earlier this week, if you're to be guided by that, I think the government's tax measure was supported by 51%. Our 25 cent a litre reduction in the petrol tax, so diesel and petrol down by 25 cents under our plan, starting straight away if we're elected, that was at 68%.
But you could have just waved it through. It would have been quite easy to do.
Well, why vote for us if we're just a carbon copy of the Labor Party? That's not what I've stood for.
But that's actually a question about why match the bulk billing promise but not tax cuts as the party of lower tax?
Because I strongly believe in the fact that the government has broken the Medicare system. When I was Health Minister, the bulk billing rate was at 84%. Today it's at 77%. And the beauty of the 25 cent a litre reduction in petrol and diesel under our plan is that it is economy-wide in its benefit.
But it's 12 months only.
Well, it's 12 months to be reviewed at the end of that period.
So you might do it again?
Well, if we think that there is a longer period of recovery required from Labor's mess, then we'll look at any measure to try and provide relief to Australians.
Andrew, what did you make of Mr Dutton's comments when it comes to savings that the opposition is looking at, particularly in the public service?
Well, he's not doing what Tony Abbott did in 2013, which is promise no cuts to various things like the ABC and SBS, and then, of course, he did the 2014 budget where he proposed the cuts. So he's not quarantining the health and education departments, which Labor is seizing on, but he's saying no frontline services cut, but he's also basically suggesting he might cut the ABC. You didn't rule out making cuts to the health and education departments today. Could that occur? How can you ensure it's not frontline services?
Andrew, if you have a look at the figures that are in, and this is a point I made today, the figures in the budget now for health and for education, they are the figures that we commit to. So the same funding, the same spending on health and education, we stick to and we commit to, and I've said that we will legislate for that.
There's a lot of critics on your side about the ABC, so what about, would you have a look at their budget?
Well, again, I think the approach that we would take is to reward excellence and to where we find waste, to cut that waste.
You're not ruling any of that out, that's for sure. And the other language that was quite clear is strong on Trump, strong also on the China vessels, and says the Prime Minister's guilty of appeasement.
When are we getting the defence announcement? That's the question. I'll wager with you, Kieran, it'll be before pre-poll opens, but we know they're going to announce an increase in defence spending, probably paid for by those public service cuts that he is considering. And this is where the recent visit of the Chinese naval ships and this story around the Chinese research vessel broken by our colleague Sherry Markson comes into play. And I made the comparison, though, to Peter Dutton. What about a couple of years ago when Scott Morrison was in and the Chinese warships came into Sydney Harbour? He said, well, that's different. That was planned. So there you go. Have a listen.
Prime Minister can't even stand up and explain his theory on why these surveillance ships are circumnavigating our country. This hasn't happened in this fashion before. And for the government not to have...
They say they came into Sydney Harbour during Scott Morrison.
But there was an arrangement put in place for that to happen. There were months of planning in relation to that. It's chalk and cheese. There's no problem with an arranged visit, and we have cordial relations with many countries. But to turn up and to start exercises without the government knowing about it, that's a complete abrogation of the Defence Minister's responsibility.